Hi, everyone. I'm going to get started because I know that more people will be joining us, but it's noon and I can start with my brief introduction slowly to give everyone a chance to get acclimated. I'm Elena Canfer and welcome to our Fox Family Lecture Series at the Carl R. Woese Institute for Genomic Biology. Our Fox Family Lecture Series, for those of you who don't know, started about over 5 years ago. And the lecture is supported with a gift and the vision from Peter and Kim Fox to create an entrepreneurial ecosystem here in Champaign, Urbana that fosters scientific innovation and bioeconomic development. We've been really lucky with the connections we've made and continue with this lecture today, our guest presentation by Dr. Marc Martin-Casas from the Illumina Accelerator. I want to tell you how lucky I am that I met Marc. During the pandemic, I don't know how I thought to go to this, but the Illumina Genomic Startup Forum was online in December of 2020. And I thought, well, this is something I never would be able to go to or would really take the time to go to, I think, in normal times. But because it was online, I signed up and I'm so glad I did. I was extremely impressed with the range of speakers and startups that were featured. And also, I was really lucky that the conference technology that they had adopted at the Illumina Accelerator was fantastic, and it allowed me to meet Marc and his colleague Amanda in person, what I felt like was in person at that time, in two dimensions at least, face to face, and get to know each other a little bit more and intrigue them to come visit our Midwest ecosystem for the entrepreneurial environment that we have here. I thought Marc would be a great speaker in our series. And while he is giving his lecture today via Zoom, he's here in person meeting with a number of people and would be happy to follow up with others afterwards. So we're really pleased to welcome Marc here to the Midwest, to the University of Illinois, and to the IGB. Marc joined Illumina in 2019 to support the sourcing and development of the Illumina Accelerator startups. And he's currently head of the Illumina Accelerator in San Francisco. Previously, Marc led Biotech Connection in the Bay Area, an incorporated nonprofit that accelerates innovation and development for biotech startups and big pharma by bringing together academic scientists, entrepreneurs, and investors. So he's familiar with our type of environment. Prior to that, Marc was on the investment team at Lamb Research Capital, where he sourced and performed diligence on life science investment opportunities. Marc earned his PhD in computational biology, which we all know is a very sought after degree right now. So I think they're lucky to have you at the Illumina Accelerator because I know you'd have a lot of other opportunities also. He got his degree at UC Berkeley, and he focused on the development of novel tools to characterize, model, and predict heterogeneous behavior in cell populations and other complex biochemical systems. His Illumina Accelerator has been involved in the starting of 61 different companies. And in watching Marc's conversation with our scientists this morning and with Fox Development Corporation, I think you'll agree with me that he's got quite a wide range of information to share with us and expertise to share. And I'm happy to introduce him and greet him here. If you have questions, please chat them throughout the presentation and we'll read them afterwards. Or when Marc's done with his presentation, we'll open it up so you can ask your questions directly. Thanks, Marc, for being here.
Thank you so much, Elena, and thanks everyone for having me here. I'm actually very excited to share my 2 cents on our experience and my team's experience in building and investing in genomics companies. A huge thank you, obviously, to Peter and Kim Fox for providing the support for me to come here and be able to come meet the great science, the great talent that you guys have here at University of Illinois. So super excited to be here. Today, I kind of would like you to see a little bit like what my day-to-day kind of looks like, what I think and how we think, my team and I thinks when it comes to actually building and investing in startups. And then telling you a little bit why we feel so excited about genomics and what we think genomics is the next big thing, not only in human health, but also animal health, agriculture, and beyond. So I'm going to share my screen. I prepared a few slides here. Can you see my screen? Great. So the title of the talk today will be Building Breakthrough Genomic Startups. I would like to start a little bit discussing my background, which I've developed to be at the intersection of science, entrepreneurship, and investing. This kind of career path has taken me through 4 different locations, which is Barcelona in Spain, which is where I'm from, London, San Diego, and then San Francisco, which is where I currently reside. And I started with an academic, research career during my bachelor's and my master's in biotechnology, then got a PhD in computational biology from Berkeley, as Elena mentioned. And really, I fell in love with the science and being close to scientific discoveries and developments. But it also became very clear to me that I also wanted to get exposure to how that science is being operationalized and really being applied in a business setting. How can we actually make use of all that scientific knowledge in a way that can be used and leveraged by pharma companies, by small and big companies alike. So I started kind of exploring in and outside of campus, different workshops, different entrepreneurial boot camps that allowed me to explore that bug, that curiosity that I had for starting new companies and exploring new ideas. And that actually led me to my position at Lam Research Capital, which is actually a semiconductor company that back then was trying to just get into the biotech space, and they needed some biotech minds to help them understand what could be a good idea and a bad idea. So I joined the Lam Capital team in order to evaluate investments and evaluate different companies, different technologies that they would be thinking about investing in or potentially acquiring down the line. Almost concurrently, as Elena mentioned as well, I joined Biotech Connection Bay Area, which is a nonprofit in the Bay Area that actually does consulting for biotech startups and pharma by pooling academic talent from the key private and public research institutions in the Bay Area. So that to me was very powerful, because I learned that academic talent and the research that happens within academia is very sought after in the business side of things. It just needs to be packaged in the right way. So when I led the organization, I was lucky enough to actually lead nearly 20 consulting projects with top 5 pharma, with other biotech companies in the Bay Area, by essentially putting teams of people in academia together to answer specific questions. And that could be, indication prioritization for therapeutic platforms, market opportunity assessment for novel diagnostic devices. So that really made me very excited about connecting the dots between academia and the entrepreneurial and the investment ecosystem. So after that, I actually landed at Lumen Accelerator, and about 3 years ago, and Lumen Accelerator is a company creation engine that is co-located with Illumina Research and Development in SF and in Cambridge, UK. So we provide startups with capital, with unlimited sequencing, with guidance and coaching from a business perspective, but also from a technology development perspective. And finally, fully operational lab and office space in the San Francisco Bay Area and Cambridge, UK. And we package those resources in 6-month funding cycles. The current role that I have at the accelerator is head. So I lead the accelerator. I wanted to demystify a little bit what that means. It's a bit of it's a position where we kind of make the coffee and make the deal happen. Like, we have to be ready to do anything and everything in order to push companies and deals forward. But if I had to structure my functions, I would structure them in 4 key areas. One is sourcing companies and ideas. So finding companies that are developing this breakthrough genomics applications through research conferences and network. Because we go very early stage, that sometimes means shadowing the progress of academic research that might be mature enough to translate it into potential companies, and also originate internal ideas based on the thesis that we have, based on what works and what doesn't work, or what we have seen work, what we have seen not work. The second thing we do very extensively is when we do partner with companies, when we invest in companies, we have to support them day in, day out from a business, a fundraising, a technological perspective. Our whole thesis really at the Lumen Accelerator, and I think what differentiates us, is that we truly believe that we can provide companies with a technological edge, whether that's like in the form of IP or in the form of funding a lot of the proof of concept or platform experiments, to really create companies that have differentiated technologies that are difficult to replicate. They have a unique edge in the market. The third thing I do is ecosystem building. I've been doing that quite a lot in the last few months because we have been in the process of expanding both internationally and nationally. So we have to understand how different key players in the ecosystem, be it investors, entrepreneurs, and researchers, interact with each other, see if there's a missing link somewhere, and trying to deploy resources in that community in order to streamline that lab bench to company pipeline that we'd love to see very streamlined. And finally, we have internal operations, which means raising funds for our companies, monitoring the progress of our companies, and obviously updating our CEO at Illumina on how we're doing. But that also includes other things like making coffee, scheduling meetings. Like, it's literally a very multidisciplinary role. So why do we do what we do? You know, now that I have kind of talked a little bit about my path, and I would love, you know, if there's anyone that is curious to understand how I've made every step, and because you feel that this resonates, I'm happy to talk to you following this conversation. But why do we do what we do, and why does the Lumen Accelerator exist in the first place? Well, the answer, and this is a slide that I add to all my presentations, is that we have truly experienced a very, very substantial democratization of genomics that is enabling widespread adoption of the technology and enabling breakthroughs. So 20 years ago, when the first whole human genome was sequenced, it came at about a cost of $100 million. Right now, we're at a $600 cost. And most of the decrease of this expense and this cost actually came because of Illumina's technology, which we're very proud of. But that also means that discoveries that were unimaginable a few years ago are now becoming a routine. And it is our true belief that genomics and genomic technologies will make their way into the practice of human health, you know, into medical practice, into agriculture, into animal health, and into synthetic biology and other kinds of tools that will allow us to create a more sustainable future for our planet. So how do we even think about starting to create all these different products? There's a lot of potential impact, but what is the basic what are the basic steps for us to be thinking about creating all these products? So for us, that's always going to be genomic and multi-omic data, right? Like, we have access to a lot of omic data now that we think can lead to the spin out of multiple products in many different fields, including therapeutic targets and candidates, and that include gene and cell therapies. Diagnostics that are early and comprehensive, which includes oncology and infectious disease. And a potential example of this could be GRAIL, which was recently acquired by Illumina, which has developed a test for a liquid biopsy test to detect over 50 different kinds of cancers in just one sample of blood in early stages before it actually becomes symptomatic. We also have engineered strains and materials, so synthetic biology. We've all heard of petroleum-based processes that are being replaced by engineered yeast or engineered plants, and that's very, very exciting. And finally, we have research tools that can sit upstream or downstream of this genomic and multi-omic data. But obviously, this step, this jump between data and products doesn't happen on its own. We truly believe that the most efficient way that someone can actually do this is via a startup. We think that startups are the most efficient unit of innovation that there is, because they're nimble, because they're fast, because they have the minimal required components and the commitment to actually see this through. So we see the startup as having 4 key different components. And the first one of all of them that I would like to highlight is the expertise and the human capital, aka the team. And I'm going to go into each one of these four elements in a little bit. But the first one is expertise in human capital. The second one is a defensible technology and biology insights. The third one is investment and network. And the fourth one is genomic and multi-omic data. We think that a startup can capitalize on these four key resources in order to become product engines that can really impact human health and beyond through the commercialization of all these different products. So let's start from the beginning. Let's start from expertise in human capital and define a little bit, what do we think, or what do we mean when we say we need expertise in human capital within a company? I'd like to emphasize before I go further, this is based on our experience, is far from being prescriptive. There's a million stories about how entrepreneurs have made things work. And this is just the archetype of what we see at a Lumen Accelerator. So the team, when we talk about a team, we ideally mean a co-founding team of 2+ founders with a history of success working together. It can also be a history of failure working together. It just has to be a history of them working together and realizing that they have complementary skill sets, that they get along, that they work together well, and that they are resilient, right? I would like to emphasize here one aspect, one of these skills, one of these key features, which is coachability. And what I mean by coachability, and what we mean at a Lumen Accelerator by coachability, is a team that is able to hold their vision very close to their heart, and actually remain pretty committed to fulfilling that vision and that end goal. But with the ability to actually take feedback along the way to decide what the most optimal path is going to be in order to get to that goal, in order to get to that vision. We believe it's great to work with founders that stay humble and that stay committed to accepting feedback every now and then. And that creates great partnerships with people within and outside, in and outside of their company. So in order to illustrate this, I wanted to tell you about 3 quotes that I actually have heard in my career about founders, just to highlight the importance of the team, right? The first one that I heard from someone that actually leads an investment fund in Palo Alto. She mentioned to me that 80% of times investors pass is because of the team. This is, of course, this is a very difficult feedback to give. You're not going to get an investor to tell you that they didn't invest in you because they don't like you, or because they don't like someone in the team, or they don't like something about the dynamics. But this is something that needs to be very clear, right? People work with people. People choose people, and people choose teams. So choosing a great team to work with is very important. The second quote that I wanted to highlight is someone also at a VC firm that mentioned that she'd like to feel like she can have a coffee beer with the founders of a company they invest in. And that's understandable because they are essentially entering in a relationship with the startup itself. And that can mean years and years of trying to make something work and going through ups and downs. So being able to support someone through thick and thin is very, very important. And finally, another quote that I heard is how they treat someone, like a waiter or like someone else within their environment that is outside of the startup, can be a telltale sign of how they treat their team. And that's important. That's an important thing that people are paying attention to all the time, because you want to have teams that support each other and are able to retain talent, right? So the only way to do that is through essentially being respectful towards each other. So clearly, I added the team first because I think especially at the early stages, it's the single most important component that a company might have. The second component that I want to highlight is investment. And investment obviously is needed to power the company's operations. It can be non-dilutive or dilutive. And I'm obviously happy to go into the definitions a little bit more than what I'm going to go through now, but please ask me questions towards the end if you have any details you'd like to know about. The first thing I wanted to mention is the dilutive sources. That means that when someone gives you capital, you're essentially giving up some level of ownership over your company, right? That includes VCs like NEA, like Andreessen Horowitz, like Arch, which you have up here in Chicago. And that it also includes angel investors and also family and friends that might be able to support you through the initial stages of your startup. The advantage of engaging in dilutive sources of capital is that if you find a great partner, they are going to be owning essentially a portion of your company. It might be 8%, it might be 10%, it might be, a small portion. But effectively, if you find a great partner, they are also very committed to making you successful. And that can be the biggest difference that one can make actually to the company, is creating and building a great group of investors that will just be determined to actually take you all the way to commercialization, to success, to IPO, whatever the exit means. The disadvantage here is obviously that you're giving up some ownership over the company. And if you pick the wrong partner, if you pick the wrong investor, they are going to be owning part of your company for a very long time, obviously. The second source of capital, which in academia we're more used to hearing about, is non-dilutive sources, right? So grants, like basic and translational research, grants dedicated to small businesses like SBIR and STTR grants. There's obviously a myriad of different institutions that provide these grants, Department of Defense, and NSF, and NIH, you name it. And essentially you commit, as you know, to working on a certain project toward a certain objective in exchange for funding. We also have loans, which is pretty much how a car and a mortgage would actually work. And then we have deals, right? Like, so if you have a technology that can be licensed to a potential partner, they might offer you some cash, some money in exchange for access to that technology. The advantage here is that obviously you're not giving up ownership over a company. But the disadvantage is that if the grants, especially when it comes to grants, if they don't align very well with your end vision, they can become a distraction, because you are supposed to be working on something in parallel to also the goal of your company. So that might make it a little bit more difficult for you to push forward in a very small amount of time, like you're supposed to when you're leading your startup. So obviously, like, investment is needed, and typically what we see at a Lumen Accelerator is a combination of non-dilutive sources with dilutive sources that can push the company forward. The third company that I'd like to highlight, the third feature that I'd like to highlight is the technology. When I talk about defensibility and novel biology insights, what do I mean? So generally, the startup operations and milestones revolve around further developing, validating, and monetizing or productizing the technology platform. And the first thing I would like to say here is that technology does not equal product. We talked about how, a technology in combination with genomic and multi-omic data sets can actually lead to all these products that can be commercialized, be it therapeutics, diagnostics, etc. That means that your technology is not equal to the end product that we all commercialize. It can be if you're actually adopting a fee-for-service type business model in which you're offering your technology platform to other people and you're enabling them. But that's typically or sometimes not the strategy that some companies end up choosing. They choose to keep the technology in-house, develop the insights themselves, and actually create higher value for the company by either starting the development of their products in-house and then commercializing, or they're selling them to pharma or others. So in order to convey here the concept of defensibility, I wanted to bring up a short case study just to imagine yourselves, you're the founder of an early stage company with promising technology, and a large company that has more money, more resources, and a bigger team realizes the space that you have is great and that you're targeting is very attractive, and that they want to compete with you to tackle the same problem. How do you win as a small company? Like, what do you have in your toolkit that you can actually pull out in order to fend off such a challenge, right? There's many things actually, and more than what people typically think, because if you are an early stage company coming out of academia, what is very clear is that you have domain expertise. You have deep expertise in the field and published work. You can hit the ground running. You're familiar with the pitfalls and the challenges of the space and the technology because you have that level of domain expertise. If your technology is unique and differentiated, that helps a lot, obviously. The startup is speedy and nimble, just by definition. So the ability to pivot quickly when we hit a wall will be very, very pivotal for a company to actually be successful. There's tools, as you know, to actually protect your discoveries, be it through patents, trade secrets, or other IP strategies. And that also includes proprietary data, any samples that you might have exclusive access to that you can extract proprietary data from, that's great. And the capital and network, if you have a great network, if you have a great support from investors and partners, that's amazing. And then obviously you also need a healthy culture. You need to retain employees, you need to retain your talents so that they don't get poached. You need to retain employees so you can continue on delivering on those milestones that I was talking about. So clearly technology, very important, as well as the team and the investment. And the last component that I wanted to talk about is genomic data, the data set itself, right? Leveraging these omics databases as product engines. When I think about that data and I think about our startups, to me, it's clear that they're all trying to establish this virtuous cycle, right, in which they have a certain experimental and technology strategy that stems from a given hypothesis. That will include patient recruitment, study design, access to samples, and technology roadmap, as well as technology development. And from that, you can extract some data sets, multi-omic, genomic, that it can include other phenotypic characteristics as well, depending on what you're looking at. And from that data, you can extract insights that can inform, you can use to iterate on your experimental and technology strategy. The key here that I think I've been kind of alluding to as like the very important part of translation is translating that data through the insights that you get into products, therapeutics, diagnostics, and tools, and actually learning as you develop those products to actually inform the way that you're going to launch your next technology, you're going to launch the next program that you might have in mind. An example of this could be, genome mining technology that you're using in cancer patient tissue samples in order to identify novel therapeutic targets. You might have the multi-omic data, and your technology might allow you to get insights to find those targets in order to develop them either in-house or to partner it out to some pharma as well. So those four things constitute what I think a startup and what we think a startup should have. I wanted to add before I start talking about what we do at Lumen Accelerator in particular, I wanted to add some common misconceptions when starting a company that I think we come across quite a bit. The first one is technology is the single most important thing when starting a company. Technology is very important, but the team is actually arguably more important, the most important factor here, because a great technology with a team that doesn't get along, that is not behaving well, not working well together, is just never going to make it. So it's very important to take into account team when considering this leap into developing products. The second thing that I think we hear from a lot of people, and again, I want to stay far from being prescriptive because there's many stories, is the notion that one can start a company alone, and that's true. You can start a company alone, but actually adding a team of people can robustify against the ups and downs of a company. It can robustify against personal struggles as well, allow you to kind of have more and higher quality of life, if you're starting a company. So that's another consideration here. No one has actually taken a company to IPO just by themselves, right? They need a team of people around them to help execute. So you'll have to just do that at some point. The third thing is I can start a company part-time. The truth is that you can start exploring companies part-time, but actually once you hit the ground running, you'll probably need the commitment, and it will be asked of you by investors because they don't want to be putting money into a side project. They want to be putting money into something that you've devoted your time to. And if you believe in it enough, you are going to essentially quit your day job and start your company. And that doesn't mean, you know, you cannot find the right people to lead the company, and you can stay involved in some way, shape, or form, but it does need a team that is full-time. The fourth thing that I wanted to highlight is I will start the company after I raise the money I need. That's again the same issue. It's a chicken and egg problem of, you know, I want to have the money to start my company, but then if I don't start my company full time, investors are not going to support my company. Non-dilutive sources of funding can be a great way here. Like getting grants can be a great way to get started, but that typically becomes a chicken and egg problem that is difficult to overcome sometimes. And finally, I cannot start a company with my academic experience only. I need more business experience. We have seen that. We at Lumen Accelerator, we love first-time founders. We love founders that are close to the technology. We love founders that are close to the research. And we have learned that they can make great C-level executives, at least for the early years of the company, when the focus of the company is most focused on developing the technology, validating it, monetizing it. We have seen tremendous levels of success with some of our companies that have come out of academia, with PhDs, postdocs, and other trainees. So all that is great for us. So, you know, just as a recap, right? Like we talked about the different components of a startup. We talked about this product engine. The startup can become a very efficient product engine to develop and spin out therapeutics, diagnostics, engineered strains and materials, and then research tools as well. But how do we operationalize that? Right? Like this is a very kind of schematic view on how these things work. How do we at Illumina do it? And what can others learn from how we're doing things? So I'd like to introduce you to our Illumina for Startups initiative. So Illumina for Startups is our expanded portal for startups and VCs to catalyze innovation across startup stage and geography. So we're growing an ecosystem that is global to help create, launch, and grow genomic startups across the globe. The first initiative that I'd like to talk about, which is the one that I lead, is Lumen Accelerator, which is the flagship, right? It all started with Lumen Accelerator, and we have been in the process of expanding into China and Australia, and soon we'll announce more locations as well. The first thing that I want to talk about is the Lumen Accelerator. So what are we? We are a company creation engine, as I mentioned earlier, building breakthrough genomic startups. We're co-located with Illumina Research because we want to emphasize the importance of technology development and really being able to pull some of the resources from our Illumina sites, be it, you know, reimbursement experts, market access experts, be it prototyping and product development experts that can really help our startups. And that we have found to be very useful for their development. The resources that we provide, as I mentioned earlier, include capital, unlimited sequencing, coaching, and then the facility that we have in Foster City, California, which is close to San Francisco, and then in Cambridge, UK as well. We typically, when we think about expanding the accelerator, we probably think about expanding to other areas where we are co-located with Illumina, but we are exploring additional models. I want to give you a snapshot of all of our companies, right? Like, so we have 61 companies, and you can see here that they span the spectrum that I was talking to you about earlier. We have about 42% of our companies in therapeutics, a third in diagnostics, and the remainder in synthetic biology and tools, as well as direct-to-consumer and software-based companies. So we have had 13 funding cycles. Our companies have raised a little over $1 billion in external VC funding. And we've had 2 acquisitions, and 2 out of something like 3 or 4 out of the 61 companies have actually wound down, but the rest are doing very well. And we have a follow-on funding rate of 94%, which is extremely high. So we're happy with that track record so far. In terms of diversity, so we have about 56% of our companies that have female co-founders, and then 22% of our companies are female CEOs. We have a lot of work to do here, but the industry rate of female CEOs is actually 8%, And then about 20% of companies are actually female co-founded. So we're more than double of that process. And we look forward to continuing to do work in this area. And then, as I said, we have 2 sites in the SF Bay Area and Cambridge, UK as well. I wanted to highlight as well a couple of case studies on, some of these companies that we have had that have come to us, just to highlight how early we go sometimes in the supporting of these companies and how long it really takes sometimes in biotech to get them to a clinical stage, right? So the first case study I wanted to showcase is Encoded Therapeutics. That was actually one of the first startups that we ever supported. They came to us with the idea that non-coding regions of the genome, namely they were looking at regulatory elements that could actually be leveraged to make gene therapies more safe and more efficacious as well. So they had two co-founders initially, a recent PhD grad from MIT and another PhD grad that ended up, a PhD candidate that ended up dropping out. And we selected them at the accelerator because they had raised some pre-seed money. They had secured a first deal with pharma, and they developed a novel next generation sequencing technology to look at these regulatory elements in a lot of detail. So we supported that vision, and we believed in the team's commitment to seeing it through. So throughout the accelerator, we supported them, and we gave them the opportunity to create and generate over 15 terabases of sequencing data for tissue-specific non-coding regulatory elements that actually led to their first candidates in their gene therapy. Throughout that time, they actually did a lot of indication prioritization work, and they wanted to focus in and hone in on neurology in particular, and performing gene therapy for a rare disease called Dravet syndrome, which is a rare form of child epilepsy. By the time they graduated from the accelerator, they had about 6 full-time employees, and ever since then they have been raising a new round of funding every single year. This company in particular has raised something like $300-400 million from Arch and Venrock and the key kind of VC players in the biotech space in the US. And they have consistently expanded and doubled in size every single year. And they're currently advancing several programs through preclinical studies. They started their phase 1 clinical program for their lead candidate for Dravet syndrome, as I mentioned, last year. So Encoded is one example of a therapeutics company that came to us, generated the data necessary in order to extract those insights and extract those candidates that they needed to move into preclinical studies. And then they effectively were off to the races. Second company that I'd like to highlight, which is pretty different, is Checkerspot. Checkerspot is more on the synthetic biology side of things. Checkerspot effectively came to us with a team of people from Solazyme that had a lot of expertise in the space. And they came us with a conviction that they could actually engineer algae and other organisms like yeast to produce oils and other high performance materials that represented an alternative to petroleum derived materials, right? So when they came to us, they actually, sequence and analyze biosynthetic pathways from many rare types of algae, many rare types of plants. They engineered the strains in a way that allowed them to optimize for production, and they actually ended up becoming a material supplier for other companies that are looking to create high performance materials. What they ended up doing, which I think is very interesting, is that despite Checkerspot becoming a material supplier, they actually ended up creating a consumer subsidiary called Wonder Alpine. If you ski, maybe you have heard of them. But the Wonder Alpine subsidiary is actually the company that is taking those insights that I was talking about and those materials into the products, which are downhill skis that are powered by Genomics. They call them the first Genomics powered downhill skis that have been synthesized using Genomics. They're already commercial. They're getting rave reviews, and they're doing an amazing job at really pushing genomics into the hands of the consumers, right? And I think that they've gotten a great reception by environmentally minded individuals, which, you know, skiers, hikers tend to be, in order to get their materials from something that is actually sustainable. They have partnered with Gore-Tex. They have partnered with several entities that have this outdoor kind of sporty gear synthesized from their materials. So that's another example of one of our companies and how generating this data set on biosynthetic pathways allows them to actually push forward. The second thing, the second initiative that I wanted to highlight here is our China initiative. And we announced that maybe 6 months ago. And we're doing that in partnership with Sequoia Capital. Sequoia is one of the key VCs in the world, and they have a China subsidiary. And China, as you know, is a different market, very different to the type of innovation that we can expect here. So we needed a partner on the ground in order to help us deploy this novel innovation model. And the difference here with our this incubator, we are calling it, is that Illumina will provide the expertise and will provide the sequencing and a lot of some of the technology direction, but Sequoia Capital will be providing the capital as well as the facility and some of the coaching as well. So this is another model in which we get less involved in the company building side of things because we have a partner on the ground that can do that. But actually, we're still providing the genomics expertise and the sequencing that we'll be providing. And finally, we have one last initiative for now, which is we're calling the Illumina for Startups Network in Australia, and we're deploying someone on the ground there to really connect the dots of the ecosystem, to build an ecosystem of genomic startups that is healthy, and to really streamline that process of translating research that's happening within academia to a company. So the details of that is that we have a partnership with the University of Melbourne Genomics Hub. We know that the University of Melbourne and the Genomics Hub in particular, they have a lot of core platforms, clinical genomics, bioinformatics, health economics, you name it. They have connections and partnerships with the Medical Research Future Fund, as well as granting agencies and the opportunity to really engage in full-scale pharmaclinical trials. So what they decided they needed, the missing piece there, was the startup network, right? Some thought leadership, the coaching, the grants and the genomic expertise, and the examples of success stories that would bring a researcher from academia to the point of saying, hey, like I actually do want to start my own company as well. And I would love to have a partner for that. So then that's when we step in. We actually deployed a person on the ground, an entrepreneurial fellow, that will allow us to really connect the dots between these different entities and these different parts of an ecosystem that can sometimes be very disconnected, but could benefit from really having this level of connection alongside each other. So that was the last of our initiatives that is global that I wanted to mention. And then finally, I wanted to close, by mentioning a few trends in genomics and tips for entrepreneurs. Actually, a few months ago, I published this article on LinkedIn and Medium as well, called "What's Next in Genomics: 6 Trends and 6 Tips" by 2 visionaries. I actually sat down with Emily Laprousse, who is CEO of Twist Biosciences, and Mustafa Ronagi, who was the co-founder of Lumen Accelerator and was the former CTO of Illumina, who actually led and spearheaded a lot of the technology improvements that led to the decrease in genomic costs. And that democratization that I was talking about was largely spearheaded by him. So I sat down with both of them to discuss some trends where they see the field of genomics being headed, and also 6 tips, right? And I would invite you all to read the article if you're interested in learning about the trends. I think we wouldn't have time for that now, but I did want to copy paste here the tips, which I think mirror a lot of what I've been saying throughout this presentation. And the first one being go all in, right? Really take your chances, pick a team that fits you professionally and personally with complementary skill sets. Raise today, raise tomorrow, raise every day. That is fundraising, right? Stay in touch with people that might be able to fund or partner with you on your endeavor. Go big or go home, right? Like, you know, if you have to work on a company part-time in perpetuity, then maybe it's not the right thing to do, but maybe you could take it way further if you went big and you went full-time. Design your fundraising milestones carefully. If you're raising a $5 million seed round, for example, try to articulate why you're raising that $5 million seed. What is that going to take you through? What milestones are you looking to accomplish with that? And what value are you going to create in order to push your company forward? And finally, surround yourself with the very best and stay in close communication with them. We all have worked with, you know, excellent colleagues. We have worked with excellent people that have been in our lives, and sometimes we fall out of touch. But I think you never know when you want to start a new startup, a new company, and you might want to dust off that Rolodex and really try to call people that you know you would get along with very, very well. So I think that that's it from me. We function in application deadlines, in application cycles. Our application deadline is actually this week, but obviously I'm happy to discuss if there were any interest or any projects. I'm happy to discuss it offline, and we could do something about it. So here you have my email, and then you have also my the website of the accelerator, so you can check more details about it, and you can tell me what you'd be interested in hearing or doing. I'm all ears. So I believe that now we go to questions.